I'm also, excuse me, I'm also the hearing officer for today's informal hearing. This involves the Kenney Seng Construction Company and their tentative approval on a notice of intent to commence large mining operations. I've got some opening statements to make that I'll do so after I have a representation of parties. So first of all, for the division.
Gordon Rowe, Assistant Attorney General representing the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. I'm joined by April Bate, Dana Dean, and Paul Baker from the division.
Okay. And from the South Utah County Community Voice, we have?
I'm Julie Sainsbury.
Okay, thank you very much. And for Kenney Seng Construction?
I'm David Jeffs, and I have Kenney Seng here with me as well.
Okay.
And Amber Withers is.
And I think Amber Withers is also present on behalf of Kenney Seng Construction.
Okay, Amber, can you hear and see us okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Well, let me start out with these opening statements because this will give you a guide for how we're going to proceed today. So on December 23rd of 2019, this past year, the division tentatively approved Kenney Seng Construction Company's application for an amended notice of intention to commence large mining operations. After the division grants such tentative approval, the division provides notice of the tentative approval to the public to allow any interested parties an opportunity to comment. If the division receives any written objections during the public comment period, the division must hold an informal hearing wherein it can accept comments from the parties and from members of the public. That's what this informal hearing is today. During the comment period following the, excuse me, during the comment period following the division's tentative approval, the division received comments and requests to schedule an informal hearing. This meeting is the informal hearing to receive comments on the division's tentative approval of Kenney Seng's notice of intent. This informal hearing is governed by Utah Administrative Code, Rule R647-5-106. And I'd ask everyone to please refer to that rule on any questions regarding the procedure for today's hearing. A court reporter is present to accurately capture everyone's comments. I ask that only one person speak at a time and that you properly identify yourself for the record when it's your turn to speak. Please speak clearly and slowly. Particularly during this electronic hearing, it may be necessary for the court reporter to interrupt if she cannot clearly hear your comments. Please follow any directions given by the court reporter so she may accurately capture your comments. I'd like to thank everyone present for your understanding regarding the difficulty in getting this hearing scheduled. Given the current pandemic, it was necessary to hold this hearing electronically. I ask everyone to please be patient as we work through any technical difficulties that we may encounter. And given the electronic nature of this hearing, I'm sensitive to the fact that we have some interested community members who may not be present. I'd like to remind everyone that we are live streaming this hearing, and we're also recording the proceeding today, and it can be viewed later on the Utah Department of Natural Resources YouTube channel. I issued a letter to each party outlining the procedures and scope of the hearing today. To briefly outline that letter, it described the procedural practices that will govern today's hearing. The parties present are the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining, the South Utah County Community Voice, and Kenney Seng Construction Company. The way the hearing is going to go today is each party will have 20 minutes to comment on the division's tentative approval. The division will speak first, followed by community voice, and finally Kenney Seng. To ensure an efficient hearing, no cross-examination will be allowed. However, following each party's presentation, each party will then have a 5-minute rebuttal period to make final points or to respond to other comments. After this hearing concludes, the division will allow for an additional period of public comment. This will close at 5 p.m. 1 week from today. You may submit written comment either in paper or electronic form. If you're filing a comment in paper form, please send it to Ms. Dana Dean and her attention at the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining, 1594 West North Temple, Suite 1210, Salt Lake City, Utah, 84116. If you would like to submit electronically, the link can be found both in the procedures letter that I issued or on the division's website. So that everyone's clear on this, I'll reiterate this same statement at the conclusion of today's hearing. I'd also like to address the scope of this hearing. This hearing is to receive comments regarding the division's tentative approval of the amended notice of intent. Please limit your comments to matters relating to that amendment. This is not an opportunity to express comments about other aspects of the permit that have already been previously permitted. This opportunity is to draw attention to any issues the division may have missed during their review of the amendment application as within the scope of the pertinent statute and rules. The division is not allowed to consider any comments that fall outside this scope. Finally, I'd like everyone to know that this meeting will conclude promptly at 3 o'clock. So before we begin, I think each of the parties has identified themselves. Are there any other comments? And oh, by the way, I have as my legal counsel, Ms. Haley Sosa, who is from the Attorney General's office. She'll be advising me just as Mr. Rowe is advising the division. So I think we've already named the representatives who are going to be speaking. We'll turn the time over to the division now for their 20-minute presentation.
Thank you, Director Baza, members of the public, and the representatives from Kenney Seng for attending today. The division would like to thank the parties and the members of the public for their thoughtful comments and understanding the need to conduct this hearing electronically. Given that this hearing is informal, I will be turning over the bulk of the time to Ms. April Abate for the bulk of the presentation from the division. Ms. Abate will explain the proposal and address the comments received throughout the process. The division also has Ms. Dana Dean and Mr. Paul Baker available to provide additional information or answer any questions the hearing examiner may have. So with that, I'll turn over the time to Ms. Abate.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, everyone. It's good to be with you today. I thought I would just start out with a brief timeline as to how this notice of intent came about, and then I will just summarize some of the points in the notice of intent. And then I'll talk about some of the substantive comments that we received from the public. So this notice of intent came about with a citation of noncompliance that was issued back in October of 2018 when I inspected the mine site. At that time, it was operating as a sand and gravel pit exclusively. However, there was some bedrock that was encountered, and bedrock is not exempt from our regulatory program. So as a result of that, a citation was issued requiring Kenney Seng Construction to furnish a notice of intent should they intend to mine into the bedrock. So a notice of intent was submitted to the division in September of 2019. And as Director Baza mentioned, it was recently tentatively approved. The highlights of this particular mine plan is that the land that the Kenney Seng Construction is operating on is owned by Payson City. The mineral rights and surface rights are leased by Mr. Seng for the operation. It has operated as a sand and gravel pit since 1996. And according to the application that we received, the operations are estimated to go up through the year 2034. The mining will include limestone bedrock, as well as Lake Bonneville sand and gravels. The disturbance area will total 130 acres over the life of the mine. In fact, I think what I'll need to do here is I'm going to try to present a map of the, let me just get my screen up. I can get this going. Pardon me. Okay, here we are. And if somebody can confirm that they can see that.
I see it, April.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So this is the proposed operation. This parcel in yellow is the private land that's owned by Payson City. You can see just to the north of it, that's where the existing Payson City landfill is located and the current sand and gravel operation. So the mining operation will primarily be focused along the west side and the southwest high wall area, and it primarily will extend right out to the edge of the yellow parcel to the west and the south. The quarry floor elevation will end up at 5,000 feet, and the depth to groundwater from that floor elevation will be 278 feet to groundwater. The pit will be mined actively at 2.5 to 1, and it will be reclaimed at 2 to 1, and it will be reclaimed at 3 to 1. And this is primarily due to the fact that the post-mining land use for the operation is going to be an extension of the Payson City landfill. And the 3 to 1 requirement was something that Payson City wanted in order for the liner to be laid down and have it be on a stable slope. So because this is going to become a landfill at the post-mining land use, for post-mining land use, the division actually approved a variance request from Kenney Seng, which exempts them from any revegetation requirements. And this is because it will just end up being part of the landfill. So they're not going to be required to distribute any topsoil or conduct a revegetation planting program. They will be required to demolish or remove all of the surface facilities and grade the slopes to a 3 to 1. And as a result of that, the reclamation bond is a bit lower for an operation of this nature. It's $150,000. So that basically summarizes this particular permit. The comments that I read through, the substantive comments that I received primarily dealt with the landfill operation and the post-mining land use. The public felt that there was really no solid timeline given as to when Payson City would take over landfill operations. And the concern was that if mining ends and then there's a really long time lag from when it becomes a landfill, are we just going to have an unreclaimed, graded, but not revegetated mine site? So I think that they were alluding to the fact that we could have a big dust bowl for an unspecified amount of time. So there might be some interim reclamation here that is warranted. And part of that would possibly include this Principal Hall Road is just shown as a dirt road. There could be some recycled asphalt material that we could possibly pave that road with, just to keep down the dust. So those are primarily some of the comments that the division received that we considered substantive. And with that, I conclude my presentation.
I believe that Paul Baker, if you're available, you were briefly going to address the cultural resources analysis and determination.
Yeah, okay. So Kenney Seng Construction did a cultural resources survey of the area, or they hired a consultant to do that, and they found one isolated find. And isolated finds, by definition, are not considered to be significant. So the division made a determination that there were no significant resources, actually no historic properties at the site. And we provided that determination to the State Historic Preservation Officer, and they concurred with that determination that there were no historic properties on the site or that would be affected. And over the last 2 days, we have been in further communication with SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Officer, and confirmed that we did go through the correct procedures for this, and so there's no mitigation or anything that would be required.
Okay, and with that, that concludes the division's formal presentation. We yield the rest of our time to answer any questions from the hearing examiner, if you have any at this time. Otherwise, we'd be happy to answer questions at the end of all parties' presentations.
I do have one question for Ms. Abate. You mentioned that some of the comments that came in regarding the disposition of the mined area before it becomes a landfill, and you indicated that there was some possibility of interim reclamation. Was that analyzed for during the or for the division's tentative approval?
No, that wasn't really analyzed. One of the things that was discussed in the mine plan was that the operation was going to go to the year 2034. So we assumed that at that time, the landfill operations would just take over pretty much right after mining happened. But there really was no contingencies built into the plan about if mining ceased before then, what would be done. So I think that the interim reclamation would definitely be a reasonable item to possibly include in the plan if we needed to go back in there and review it again.
Did the mine plan suggest any possibility of concurrent reclamation?
The mine plan indicated that there'd be no concurrent reclamation.
Okay. I think that's finished with my questioning of the division.
Okay.
I'll give you a chance to provide any recommendation you want during your 5-minute rebuttal period, Mr. Rowe.
Yes, I'll save the division's recommendation for the rebuttal period, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So for South Utah County Community Voice, we have Ms. Julie Sainsbury. Welcome back, Ms. Sainsbury. For everyone's understanding, we had a similar hearing earlier this week where Ms. Sainsbury spoke, and I'm assuming you'll be giving a PowerPoint presentation as well for this hearing?
I will.
Okay.
Yes. And I
Well, let me-
appreciate being here.
Okay, let me turn 20 minutes over to you then.
Okay. I will get my PowerPoint up right now. It will just take me a second. Okay, I'll just go ahead and just kind of introduce South Utah County Community Voice. We organized several years ago when we realized that we were having a cumulative effect of all the mining activity out here in the West Mountain Benjamin area, and it was adversely affecting all of us in several ways. And so we organized and we formed to protect the residents and our livelihood out here. We have several members, and I am representing those members. I'm also here representing several members of our community who are not part of Community Voice, but do have concerns about this. I want to thank the division for all the help that they have done in helping mining operations responsibly to move forward. And I just want to kind of reiterate how part of the mission statement is that the reclamation also encourages the protection of correlative rights, and it also protects the human health and safety and the environment in the interest of the state and its citizens. In review, for those who are just joining the meeting today, and I apologize to those who were here earlier, and I debated on what to include and what not to include, but since this is a separate hearing, I felt I needed to include it. And some other additional information that we went over on Tuesday. But just a little history or an overview of West Mountain. We're a West Mountain in South Utah County. Been a rural area, and in 1942, when zoning first originated in Utah County, West Mountain was zoned a mining and grazing zone, and at that time, it was an appropriate zone for the area. But over the past 100 years, as the Highline Canal came in, and what was always an agriculture area became more so, orchards have been in here for decades. It became a unique agriculture area with its unique microclimate. The orchards have proliferated out here. But also during that time, we have had more mining operations come in. Currently, we have 7 approved mining operations on the mountain, and you can see them with the pictures of the Google Earth on here. 6 of those mining operations open on a 7-mile corridor on the east side of West Mountain. This is where the majority of the populace resides. So in 2017, we approached the Utah County Commission and asked them to reconsider the zoning on West Mountain. Upon review, they recognized that the zoning was outdated and that a zoning change needed to happen. And so what they did is that they created a new zone, a grazing zone, and the zoning was changed in 2018. Now, much of the area in West Mountain in Benjamin is an agriculture residential zone. And so when we talk about the grazing zone, we're actually talking the mountain itself. And it involved about 9,800 acres with this zoning change. One of our biggest concerns that we have with the Kenney Seng mine is the fugitive dust that is experienced out here. And I want to just review a little bit of the Maricopa County Air Quality Department research that they did, that we submitted to the DOGM when we did our informal hearing in 2017 with the Kilgore Pit. And so all of these mathematical equations come from that. So I just wanted to kind of evaluate how much water is really needed for Kenney Seng to adequately control his fugitive dust. Because in his NOI, the only source of control of the dust will be through water trucks. So in the Maricopa study, 30 gallons of water is needed when you are mining 1 cubic yard of material to suppress the dust. And for people to know, 1 acre foot of water is basically 325,851 gallons. So Kenney Seng has in his NOI that he could mine up to 60,000 cubic yards a year. So that comes to 1,800,000 gallons of water that will be needed, which is approximately 5.53 acre feet for mining, and this is for yearly. This is only for the mining itself. This does not include water to control dust on an open area, stockpiles, blasting, washing aggregate and trucks, and watering roadways. Maricopa then estimates that it takes 1,000 gallons of water per acre a day to suppress dust just on the open land. So if you were to take that 1,000 gallons of water and apply it right now to the 74.04 acres that Kenney Seng is running, and then times that by 240 days a year, assuming that they will not be running every day of the year, you get 17,769.6 gallons per year. This is an additional 18.34 acre feet that the mine will need to adequately suppress dust. Combining the two totals together, that's 23.87 acre feet of water. This, like I mentioned, does not include washing the roadways, the aggregate, the trucks. This is just for current operation. If you increase the mine area by over 1/3, it brings that amount of needed water to 31.87 acre feet. That still doesn't factor in the washing aggregate and the rocks. So the question is posed, how many water trucks would be needed to adequately suppress the fugitive dust in the mining operation? If you have a 4,000 gallon tank on the truck, you, when it comes down to a daily average, would need 10.81 water trucks a day on the mine to adequately suppress the dust. If you have a 5,000 gallon water truck with a tank capacity of that amount, you would need 8.65 water trucks a day. So, as April was saying, this is where our biggest concern lies because the mine has no reclamation plan because Payson City will use it for their landfill. So in the NOI, we feel that it is too vague, that it needs specific details. In the NOI, they need to limit the total acreage that can be opened and mined or excavated at a time. It can't be open-ended to 129.5 acres. The plan should include detailed progression of the mine. If they can write it in phases, or they can put a maximum acreage that they will mine. Currently, the language in the NOI states that the quarry will expand to the south and to the west, and that the 129.5 acres will be disturbed during the course of the mining operation. And that is as specific as it gets. So we pose the question, what April mentioned, what happens to the land that is mined before Payson City landfill makes use of it? Is it reseeded to mitigate fugitive dust? Currently in the NOI, it is not. This needs to be addressed in the NOI. The area cannot have the impact of 129.5 open acreage on the residents. The mine should only be allowed an open mining area where the fugitive dust can be adequately and responsibly managed. We need an NOI that will serve both Kenney Seng and also the community. From a quote from the Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment of the research that they did, dust pollution from mining and gravel pit operations contains significant amounts of small, dangerous particles that stay suspended in the atmosphere longer, disperse more widely, and have the ability to penetrate homes more easily. So let's look at our farming and agriculture. We presented this on Tuesday. This was a presentation that a local orchard farm presented to the Utah County Commissioners. Orchards is a big industry out here. We have a many large orchards, and for many of them, it is our sole source of income. When you have gravel operations that have fugitive dust, it increases the dust in the air. On the orchards, there are what they call spider mites. They're a pest. They thrive on dust. And this local orchard had seen an infestation of spider mites. These are pictures that they have taken, and you'll see the spider mite damage that happens to the leaves, and then the spider mite damage that happens to the cherries. So if a crop of theirs is lost, they are looking at a $4,000 per acre loss, and they cannot sell any damaged fruit by the spider mites. They had the concern, and the same thing that we find. Who is the governing body that is responsible to manage this, that is responsible to make sure that what happens on the property of the mining operations stays within the property and doesn't negatively come over and affect us? West Mountain's unique microclimate makes it one of the largest producers of orchard produce in the country. It is the third largest sour cherry producer in our nation. And I just went on Google Earth, and these are just pictures of orchards that are in really close vicinity to the Kenney Seng mine. And there are others. So this is definitely a concern for our area out here. There's some other agriculture and farming operations that are also impacted. We have beekeepers out here, and many of our local bee farmers have lost their farms, their hives yearly due to mite infestations. And just like the spider mites on the orchards, these mites with the bees thrive with dust, and we are losing our bees. We have had livestock with dust caked on their eyes, and our produce and agriculture that also has dust. Air quality and water contamination. The language in the NOI is very vague. They state that the mining operation will have limited impact on air quality and groundwater. And we ask them, how do they know? What have they done to know where that impact is and where it will grow? The health impact of mining emissions and fugitive dust is well researched and documented. Again, from the Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment, air pollution, including dust particulate matter, is significantly associated with a list of adverse health outcomes, almost as long as a list from smoking cigarettes. Air pollution affects the functioning of all major organs, increasing the risk of heart attacks, heart failure, strokes, neurologic diseases like dementia and impaired cognition, every type of lung disease, impaired fetal development and poor pregnancy outcomes, cancer, and metabolic diseases like type 2 diabetes. Air pollution accelerates the aging process, shortens the average person's lifespan, and causes increased rates of disease-related premature death. It even alters genetic function and damages chromosomes and can impair the health of future generations. We are concerned about the air quality impact here locally. We are concerned about the fugitive dust impact here locally. How does it affect us? What does the crystalline silica do to us? What is the level here? What about the PM 2.5 and the PM 10 and the PMHs? With no reclamation required on this mine, it will contribute to the future dust and emissions. It needs to be addressed. Several residential wells are located in close proximity to the mine, and you can see it in their NOI. We had a new well dug in the area, drilled in the area in April of 2020. They had to take 3 tests just to make sure that this level would still come in at the same reading. Every single time the arsenic level was too high for the well to be approved, and it was considered dangerous. The well cannot be certified without an engineer-designed water system. Another well certified on the same property 20 years ago had acceptable arsenic levels. So we ask, the Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment tested the soil at the point of the mountain and found that it had a higher than normal level of heavy metals like arsenic. We want to know if there is a correlation. We need to know if there is a correlation. So we asked Kenney Seng to establish a baseline, do the research, monitor the air, test the land and the water. Then you can factually show what impact on air and water quality the mining operation will have on the community. It will protect you and it will protect us. No expansion should be approved until assessment of exposure with current mining activity is done. Other concerns that we have that we know is not under the direct realm of the DOGM, but it is directly affected by this approval, is our road safety, the truck volume, the road infrastructure. We have the pictures of the 2 gravel trucks that tipped over into people's yards. We have the picture of the road infrastructure, how it's not wide enough. And you'll see the 2 trucks passing and the 1 truck going off the shoulder of the road because it was not wide enough. That is exactly why the truck on 5600 West, not passing, but in the sense he went off the shoulder of the road and his load shifted. That is what tipped his truck over. We have multiple trucks. And we have multiple trucks running when our school buses are going. That's how I became involved when my son was almost hit by a truck when the driver totally disregarded the blinking red lights. We are here to ask you, what about the cumulative effect of the 6 mines on the east side and the 7 mines total on West Mountain? How many mines are too many mines? And who is the governing body that can responsibly make that decision? Here are the mines on the mountain. We have Staker Parson, that is currently 285 acres open land right now, and they can go to 377. We have Kenney Seng, that is at 74.04 acres, that can go, if approved, to 129.5. We have Kilgore at 44 that can go to 94. The other operations are excavation operations, and Utah County Community Development is getting those figures for me, and I will submit them to you as soon as I have them. But I just want you to see how much acreage we have in just a small area. It has a cumulative effect. It impacts us. What is this cumulative impact on truck volume on the roads? We have a couple of pictures here that are actually to the Kilgore mine, but in January, one man counted 20 trucks lined up to turn left on 5600 West to 9600 South that were all coming from the Kenney Seng mine. It was too dark. He could not take a picture. When we have what I call job days out here, we can have trucks running on the road on every major road coming out of West Mountain and along 5600 West almost every 2 minutes. Nebo Skill District has bonded to build several schools. And when that happens, come out here and sit and see what impact the approval of these mining expansions has on our community. I'd like you to look at the consideration of cumulative impacts in the EPA review of any of NEPA documents. This, which says the combined incremental effects of human activity referred to as a cumulative impacts pose a serious threat to the environment. While they may be insignificant by themselves, cumulative impacts accumulate over time from one or more sources and can result in the degradation of important resources. In this situation, it is a cumulative impact or one or more sources. And responsibly. It needs to be judged and looked at how this mining expansion affects the area.
Ms.
Is,
Sanctuary, I need to interrupt. You're
yes,
very close to your 20 minutes. I can give
okay,
you 1 minute more to finish.
okay, I will. So is responsible mining possible? Can we coexist together? We can. Have a responsible mining plan. Only have minimum acreage open. Be detailed. Mitigate in the NOI, light and noise pollution. Limit open acreage. Control your dust. Protect us. Put in air filters on your site so we know how much is there. Establish a baseline. Line your stormwater retention pond to protect our wells. Test some residential water. Realize that health and safety are more important than industry. And on your trucks, put counters in and have a weekly average instead of a yearly average limit of what your trucks can run. We appreciate everything that you do. We appreciate your responsibility in reclaiming your slopes to 3 to 1. We appreciate the DOGM and their work in this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I have one question before we move on.
Yes,
And it is the information you presented today in terms of your concerns for fugitive dust, transportation, etc.
yes.
Was it communicated to the mining company before today?
No, they probably were not. I know there have been people who have gone to the city in regards to dust, and it has been communicated to the mining, the dust issue. Personally, I know of several families on that road that the truck volume is so overwhelming, they can hardly live. And one house is up for sale because of that. But as far as community voice personally, we have not communicated that to Kenney Seng, but I also feel it's kind of a matter of even common sense to realize when there are too many trucks in a residential farming community.
All right. Thank you for that answer.
Okay, thank
we're
you.
going to go ahead and move on to Kenney Seng, and we'll give you 20 minutes to talk about your position on this.
Hi, this is David Jeffs. I've got Kenney Seng. He's going to make a brief opening set of comments, and I think then we'll turn the time over to Amber to be responsive. And then if there's enough time, I may have a couple of comments at the end.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate you having this hearing. Thankful for the process here. Amber is our project manager at AECOM Technical Services, our consultant. And David, as you mentioned, is our legal counsel. I'd like to review roughly Kenney Seng Construction's history in this operation. We initiated our sand and gravel operation here in 1997. We've actively been in this location processing sand and gravel for 23 years. When we came, there were no homes above the Highline Canal, none along that area. They've all grown since we've been in there. This location has a very active presence of recreational enthusiasts, motocross, ATV trails, and target shooting. You can go there during the week or on the weekends, and is very active with recreational people. Initially, this property was private property within the Utah County jurisdiction. About 15 years ago, the property was obtained by Payson City. And in the last 10 years, has been annexed into Payson City. During that time, we've had permits with Utah County. We've always been in compliance and done the things we need to make sure that we're a wise steward of the property and the ground. Our sand and gravel reserves are well documented on Utah Geological Survey maps. About 4 years ago, we discovered these sand and gravel deposits had hard limestone deposits interspersed throughout the sand and gravel. And we continue to uncover this limestone deposits. And our latest one that we're continuing to uncover around our sand and gravel is well in excess of 1 million tons. We've tried to be a wise steward in areas that are inactively used. We've regraded the ground and is naturally receded. An inspection of the ground would show right now that the sheep grazing in that area want to come onto the pit property to graze rather than on the BLM property, because of the growth that we have on our property is much better than BLM property. We depend heavily on this material, and it is used for construction projects. Julie mentioned schools. We do a lot of school work, and a lot of this material goes on Nebo School District schools. And I would ask that, tentative approval be moved to final approval. Thank you. I'll turn the time over to Amber.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Amber Withers, and helping Kenney out with the presentation and speaking to some of the comments that the community voice has made. I just like to point out, we are pretty confident that our application satisfies DOGM rules and regulations. We have addressed the environmental related concerns as it pertains to DOGM rules, and DOGM has granted us that tentative approval that the application is sufficient and meets the DOGM rules, or the division's rules. Approximately 5 years ago, as Kenney pointed out, the pit was annexed into Payson city limits and is no longer in the unincorporated county area. The property is owned by Payson City, and it has been Payson City's intent to use the excavated pit once mining operations are complete for the expansion of their nearby landfill. As in regards to reclamation, due to the nature of the material, as Kenney has pointed out, the limestone being interspersed in between the sand and gravel, and the projects that come in, whether the project calls for certain specifications and what have you, almost the entire pit is going to be needed up until closure. So there really isn't an opportunity. It's not uniform that we can go in and mine one area and then move on to the next area. So therefore, that's making concurrent reclamation just not really feasible. The entire pit will be held under the DOGM surety, and it will be left as agreed with upon Payson City Corporation to expand the landfill operations to the site after completion of the mining operations. The topsoil stockpiles that are generated will be stored and stockpiled for Payson City landfill future use to use as cover in their operations. And those stockpiles have been seeded with an interim seed mix to keep them from dust and keep their nutrients in the topsoil. As it goes to unique farmland, we hear your concerns and we understand them. However, those are not within the DOGM rules. And then, as Paul Baker had mentioned, we have done a full cultural survey of the project area, and there were no eligible sites that were recorded and no petroglyphs found. We realized that is an issue out there, and so we were on the lookout for that type of stuff. And SHPO has also given us the concurrence with these findings. In regards to groundwater and surface water, the project, we do not see the project adversely impacting the groundwater resources. Groundwater is approximately 279 feet below the lowest point in the pit. We are using best management practices and good housekeeping and carefully operating procedures that will be used to minimize any fuel or lubricant spills. All the fuel and lubricants are not stored on site. They will, trucks come in and fuel and do lube service, but nothing of that nature is stored. Let's see. In addition, West Mountain Pit is covered under a multi-sector general permit for industrial stormwater. The permit has been issued by the Division of Water Quality, and the facility has been designed to collect all surface and stormwaters within the primary collection pond, which serves as a primary best management practice and permanent control structure. This water is retained for evaporation and subsurface percolation. And dealing with the roads, again, we hear the concern, we understand, and that is not within the UDOGM rules and regulations. Dealing with air quality, the project has an approval order and a fugitive dust control plan with Division of Air Quality and has remained in compliance with these permits and plans. There are certain amount of emissions that is permitted under the state law. We are regulated and monitored by DAQ and expected to comply with the law. If we were not in compliance, DAQ would bring us into compliance, and they have come out and done their inspections, and there have been no issues with DAQ at the Kenney Seng operations to date. And that concludes the portion of I have to present.
Okay, Ms. Withers, I do have a couple of questions for you. I don't know if it's best for you to answer these or for Mr. Seng to answer these, but one is that I know the Community Voice has shown the number of gravel mining operations that already exist on West Mountain. Does this depict kind of a uniqueness of operations that don't exist anywhere else in the valley or other parts of the state?
I'm going to leave that to Kenney to answer.
I guess all I'm trying to ask is this is not an operation that is easily moved elsewhere, is it?
Oh, no, you can't just pick it up and move it. The sand and gravel is where the sand and gravel is on Lake Mountain. And that entire mountain range has a lot of really good resources. And as Utah's growing as an economy and building new roads and building new houses, this type of material is needed to facilitate those projects. And when the source is in a place that's closer to where the growth is going on, it makes it more affordable for homeowners or UDOT to buy this product as close to possible to the project.
Then you mentioned as part of your presentation, I think it was groundwater permitting and stormwater permitting and dust control, air quality permitting. Are there other permits or licenses that the operation has to get? And can you name some of those if there are any?
No, they have all of the required permits and licenses that they need to do the mining at that site.
Okay. And I think Community Voice also talked about some zoning changes that occurred in history. I would assume the operation conforms to the zoning requirements for the area.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Those are all the questions I had. So with that, why don't we move on to the
I think Mr. Seng had one more comment he wanted to make, if that'd be okay.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. You had mentioned the possibility of moving this location to somewhere else. When Payson City obtained this property, their main goal in this property was future expansion for their landfill. I know it's part of their, I don't know if it's 50-year plan or what, but that is a definite goal for Payson. Is they're tentatively right now surveying and getting it ready to take it to the state legislature to get that approved into there.
Yeah, and I want to be perfectly clear. I wasn't suggesting that the operation should be or could be moved. I was
Okay.
just trying to point out that in most mining operations, the deposits are fairly unique to the area that's being mined. It's not like you can just find them anywhere, and you have to mine in the areas where the deposits are located.
Thank you.
All right, with that being said, I think we should move on to the rebuttal period. And I'm going to allow the division to take its 5 minutes for comments, rebuttals, recommendations, etc.
Thank you, Director Baza. I first, since I'm not in the same room as my client, I'd like to provide April, Paul, and Dana an opportunity to respond to anything if they'd like. Otherwise, I have some words to close with.
Well, if you do want the opportunity to consult with your client, I'm willing to allow that.
I'll let Dana speak.
So. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't have anything that I think that we need to say further. I don't have any questions. I don't see Paul or April trying to get any questions in.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure. Go ahead, Paul.
Oh, I unmuted, but I don't have any further comments.
Okay, thank you. So
I would
with
just
that,
have maybe one question.
sure.
Do we have any clarification from Payson City or a better estimate of a timeline as to when landfill operations are slated to start?
I do not. It's based on their level of activity there and as they move further west within their currently approved area, just be when that's completed and filled.
How full is that?
I can't tell you how full it is. That would be something that would have to be discussed with their landfill manager.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I think division staff has. So I think I'll close with the division's recommendation. So under the Utah Mined Lands Reclamation Act, an operator is entitled to a permit if they comply with all the applicable regulations. And the division issued its preliminary approval of the NOI because they felt that the applicant had complied with these regulations. However, the division recognizes that this process is in place for a reason, and we want the opportunity to analyze and respond to comments that come in over the next week as the comment period runs. And we would like to volunteer to draft an informative memo for the hearing officer to respond to all these comments and the presentation presented today, and analyzing some of the legal issues that have come up regarding cultural resources and the like. So with that, the division is open to any questions from the hearing officer. But again, we would like the opportunity to provide supplemental briefing on those issues.
Yes, I may take you up on that offer, Mr. Rowe. And I think it's worth, maybe I could quiz you on a certain topic. It's worth talking about this process because it seems like when the division issues its temporary or tentative approval, it's analyzing in accordance with rules and processes that have already been established. But from what I'm seeing, both in the last hearing we did earlier this week and in this hearing, that there are other issues brought out during the public comment period that need to be addressed or perhaps should be addressed. So even though our tentative approval is issued and was issued in December, I guess what I'm asking you is, does that represent some finality to the division's analysis, or is there further work the division is supposed to do based on the public comments?
Well, I think my stance on that is that we issue the tentative approval based on the analysis at that time, and at that time we feel the division feels that the permit is in compliance with the applicable regulations. However, it's since there's still time to submit additional comments, I think that the division should take that time to consider those comments in case anything comes up that needs to be addressed.
But the informative memo you're discussing needs to comport with what are the legal requirements under a regulatory program.
Correct. And that's my plan is to analyze each of the comments and see whether they bring up issues that would call into question the permit and whether it complies with the regulations. But our initial analysis is that it did comply with those regulations.
Okay. Thank you very much. Ms. Sainsbury, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to respond or comment as you need to.
Okay, thank you, Director, for this time. I think we all kind of realize what the process is to get this NOI tentative approval. And I think we all realize that when this happens, those checks in those boxes have already been done. But then I ask, what is the purpose of public input? What is the purpose of this informal hearing? If it is not to bring up concerns that the public has that is unique to the area where the mine is going to come. Kenney Seng says that West Mountain is unique in the sense of the vast resource that it has for mining and excavation, but it is also very much unique in its microclimate that is suitable for agriculture and orchards that you do not find other places in Utah County. And what is important here is that if we coexist together, these boxes just cannot be checked and said they're done. We have to coexist in a responsible way together. What they do with their mining operation cannot spill over their property lines. It cannot affect our fruit production. It cannot affect the livelihood. It cannot affect the quality of life of neighbors. It cannot affect the health and safety of residents. You can check all the boxes that you want, but in the end, what matters is what happens. A dust mitigation plan can be submitted. It can be checked off. But in reality, how many water trucks are up there mitigating the dust? The DAQ can come out and can get a reading that says they're compliant, but they're only required to come out once every 5 years unless a complaint is issued. And that dust mitigation only happens during operating hours. There are some insufficiencies in the system, and they need to be addressed. We have a cumulative effect of all these mining operations going on in our area. And if you are not the governing body that can help us, who is? And that's all we ask. Thank you. One other thing, we would like to ask that the mitigation of the cultural artifact happen, that it just not be destroyed, that you can get the State Historic Division involved or Utah Rock Art, and that it can be protected in some way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It seems like there was something I was going to ask. Oh, yes. Your presentation from today, will you submit that as
Yes.
part of the comment
You bet.
period for next week?
Yes.
Thank you very much, because we can
Thank
certainly
you.
use that. All right. Well, this is the end of the process as we had envisioned it and was indicated in my letters, in my procedural memos to the parties.
Director Baza, I think we should provide the operator their rebuttal as well.
Oh, excuse me. You're right. I should have recognized that. Mr. Seng, you have 5 minutes to do your comment and rebuttal.
I'll refer the time to our legal counsel, David Jeffs.
The only thing I wanted to address a little bit is I think comments by Ms. Sainsbury is that the focus seems to be largely on air quality issues. And I think it's appropriate for each particular organization of the government to handle the things that they're responsible for. And the Division of Air Quality is really the governmental entity that really needs to address that. And as has been previously stated, they've already there is an existing permit, and they do monitor, and Kenney Seng Construction is in compliance. The other, and I'm not objecting to the overall to the concept that you're talking about in terms of having some additional briefing, but I am a little bit worried about the process. The application in this particular case was submitted, I think, sometime in September. It took until December, recognizing there's a lot of things going on, but it took until December to get the tentative approval. The procedure, it seems, as I understand it, was to allow the public to make public comments relative to that, and the public did, in fact, go ahead and make the public comments. And then we've had this hearing, and the hearing has been scheduled and delayed because of the governmental needs to respond to the coronavirus, and I recognize that. But now what we have still pending is that not only do we have this hearing in which we've had other additional comments that have been made, and those comments should have been made, it seems to me, at the time of the original submittal of the comments and not at the time of this hearing. But in addition to that, now there's an additional opportunity for other written comments. So we've really given the opportunity for multiple occasions to have written comments, one soon after the notice of intent was issued, and now another set following this set of comments. And we're now sitting mid-June without having had any sort of final resolution. So the only thing I would encourage is that the process be expedited as quickly as possible to try and get a resolution of this matter, because it has been, the application went in September, and we're now June, and we still don't have a final approval. So we just request that as quickly as possible that a final decision be made, and that the tentative approval be confirmed as a final approval as quickly as possible.
Mr. Jeffs, thank you for mentioning that, because I too am painfully aware of how long this process has taken. And I can assure you it is my desire to expedite a decision on this as quickly as possible. To that end, I think that Mr. Rowe, you should be aware that whatever informational brief the division wants to provide, I'm going to expect that fairly short order after the comment period closes.
Absolutely. That's my plan, is to issue that shortly after the comment period closes, to not extend any more delays on this process.
Okay.
Director Baza, can
Yes.
I just make one comment? Would it be okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. We recognize that the DAQ is over air quality, and that is not the reason. That is not our argument. We are here with the fugitive dust in regards to reclamation, that it needs to be the interim reclamation. We can't have all the open acreage open, not seeded, while it's waiting to be used. So it really is a DOGM issue that can be addressed. We're not wanting a DAQ decision. We're wanting a DOGM decision on how much open acreage can be there when we are needing some of that open acreage to be seeded and reclaimed until the Payson City landfill uses it.
I appreciate that clarification from you. I need to take just a few minutes to consult with my legal counsel. It will probably take no more than about 5 minutes, but for that period of time, we'll go off the record, and then I'll provide some closing statements on this. So bear with me, and I'll be back shortly.
2, 1.
Okay, thank you for that short interlude. I'm going to make a couple of statements right now, and we obviously want to ensure that we receive public comment, as I indicated before, but let me restate some of those, the language that I use to explain how public comment can be received. So as I previously mentioned, after this informal hearing concludes, the division will allow for an additional period of public comment. This will close at 5 p.m. 1 week from today. That date is Thursday, June 18th. You may submit written comment either in paper or electronic format. If filing a comment in paper form, please send it to Ms. Dana Dean's attention at the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining, 1594 West North Temple, Suite 1210, Salt Lake City, Utah, 84116. If you want to submit it electronically, there is a link on the division's website, and I've stated that both in the procedures letter that I issued, and the website for the division shows that link as well. You'll need to go to the division's website at ogm.utah.gov and then click on the minerals program menu link at that point. I'd like to thank everybody for your participation today. I would direct Mr. Rowe and the division to go ahead and prepare your informative memorandum to me, and I think that you need to turn that in as quickly as possible after the close of the public comment period next week. This is not a decision I want to spend a lot of time on, but I'd like to hear what the division says about the comments that have been received thus far and through the coming week. I will issue a ruling following full consideration of the comments today, the ones that will come in the coming week, and the division's memorandum. I want to commit to Mr. Seng that I recognize your need for an expeditious decision here, and I'm going to do my best to try to achieve that for you. With that, we're going to call the public hearing today as closed. We'll adjourn for now, but please provide your comments and written support in the manner that I've indicated already. So thank for everybody in being involved and for your time today. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.